So Beefeater, like, and I guess people that know their music history, to me, it came out like right at the right time. It was like there was Big Boys going on, sort of Minutemen were sort of in that zone. Red Hot Chili Peppers were beginning to get underway.
Yeah, they were.
And like, I guess we could call it funk punk, what you guys were doing, for lack of a better term. It just, to me, it seems like there are straight up punk songs. There are more funk tunes. There are tunes that are high energy funk. I mean, there was a lot of different things. So was there any sort of like heavy influence where you're like, guys, let's do this? Or was it just like, did that sound just come out of you? Or was there any sort of like did you meet Doug and Fred and you were like, let's do this kind of a thing? Or was it just...
It was a pretty deliberate...
It was? Okay.
It was a pretty deliberate choice to explore that genre. That genre didn't exist at that time,
Yeah.
Rick James was out there, and
Yeah.
Prince was just coming out.
Yeah.
And, Prince had already been out, but he's getting large at that
right.
time. So there were people that were combining rock and funk.
Right.
And Mother's Finest, one of the baddest bands of all history, of course, had excelled at combining rock and funk beautifully. But punk and funk, at that time, like you said, Chili Peppers was just starting to get into that, and there's a couple other bands that might have
touched on
it. But in my head, it was still uncharted territory.
No, it was really it was fresh.
Yeah, and that was my passion, man. I loved funk music growing up.
Yeah.
And I loved the power of rock music and punk rock specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, there's got to be some way to mix this up properly. And as I said a minute ago, man, unfortunately, I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
Even at the time I was doing that, I was really young. And with my perception as it became later, if I had a different view of what could be explored, I think the music would have been a lot more hard-hitting even than it was.
Even with Beefeater?
With Beefeater, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Was there a Beefeater statement that you made that you're like, this was definitely our potential? Was there anything where you look at it and you say, this was definitely it, we were on the money with that?
As far as a particular song or
Yeah.
something?
Do any songs really stand out in your head?
Yeah, not that there's any one that was perfect, I think,
Yeah.
but it explored some nice areas. And I think toward the end we had a song called...
see if I grab the album here. If it's on.
Yeah, it's on there. And it's Just Things. It's Just Things.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first song. And man, it's been a long time. I can't even remember some of these joints.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Just Things, and it was a guitar riff that Fred had came up with that was just perfect. And it turned into a real nice, hard-hitting kind of approach. And if I had expanded on it, a lot of our other music would have took that power and catapulted from there. So if you listen to that song now, you get an idea of where I would have liked to have taken it.
Gotcha.
And it's not, as I say, it's not perfect, but that gives you a little lick of the way I like that music to sound.
The at that time also, from my reading, I know you sort of brought the vegetarian outlook into the DC scene, which was by the time Beefeater started really moving, was also in a lot of ways moving away, at least from that first generation of hardcore, was moving away from a lot of different things, from the sound to the outlook to the lifestyle, and was curious how you sort of got into the vegetarian habits. How that came.
I was into vegetarianism when I was a little tot.
Gotcha.
I wasn't living it, but I was real fascinated with it the whole time I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I'd hear about Gandhi, and I'd hear about not Nehru. What was his name? Desai.
Mm-hmm.
These Indian leaders and the way they were living. It always fascinated me.
Gotcha.
And I always knew there was something to that. But unfortunately, I was stupid. I was 20 years old before I actually did it. But when I took that leap, I realized this is the truth. This is the truth, because I'm about truth. And that's the true way to eat. So I knew that there was a lot of power in that approach. So I was living it, and even though Beefeater wasn't a vegetarian band like that, we didn't impose our diet on the other musicians.
Yeah.
But Doug and I were vegetarians, and that was always a key part of our message. Not just because of what you eat, but the whole thing of consciousness about what your daily choices make towards the world, because that was we weren't about rock and roll. We weren't about just having a good time, and
Yeah.
we were about trying to change the world, you know. And
Yeah, no,
we're serious
Beefeater
about
wasn't
it.
entertainment for sure. It was
Yeah.
a lot more than
Yeah.
a fun band to go see.
Yeah.
I got that when I
Yeah.
remember, like, you guys played that gig opening up for Bad Brains. Dove went on before you guys, and then Scream after you, and then Bad Brains at the Worcest Radio Hall. I don't know
Oh,
if
Worcest Radio Hall.
Do you
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
that night?
I do. Yeah.
What do you remember about that night? Anything stick out in your mind about that night? Just sort of curious. But I definitely remember, like, the statements were flying left and right on stage about what Beefeater was about. You know what I mean? It wasn't, you know,
I
we'd
remember
like to see these skinheads, you know, getting a fight in the pit. You know, it was a little more. There was a little different thing going on than that.
Hey, that was the season. That was the times we were in.
Yeah.
The one glimpse I remember in my mind from that night.
Yeah.
I got kind of loopy memory.
Yeah,
but,
well, my memory about that night's a little loopy too. So
there was one moment where I was playing lead guitar, and I think it was on Manic Depression.
Yeah.
The Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah,
cut.
yeah.
And at the end of it, Big Mike, who was kind of like our roadie and our buddy, grabbed me. And he's holding me real tight, and I couldn't hear what he was saying. So I said, "What are you saying? What are you saying?" He said, "Man, I love it when you play that Hendrix, man." and he was really holding me, man, a certain kind of way. And I said, "Okay," and that's the way I feel when I'm playing guitar. So I dug the fact that kind of came across a little bit.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. You guys nailed that tune, by the way. I really liked your version, and I liked the bit from Amy actually at the end. I just went back and kind of re-listened to those records like just one time, just to
She sings "Amazing Grace" on it, or is that
exactly?
Yeah.
That was neat.
Okay.
That was
okay.
Was there? How did that sort of come about? Where you had not even just on that, but also some of the other guests that popped up on the record? Because I like that your band didn't make a straight. The records weren't straight. They weren't. Here's 10 songs. We hope one of these becomes a single. These were like statements, which is what I liked about Beefeater.
Well, it's just that, I mean, like you said about Amy, she's a trained musician, and she was a master vocalist. She was more at that time, she was more in the classical field. I think she used to sing in church and stuff.
Yeah.
But she had a marvelous voice. And we had a lot of people in the scene around that time. When I say scene, I don't mean just the hardcore scene, but just people I knew around at that time who had powerful things to contribute.
Right.
So when I conceived of that record, the House Burning Down record, I was saying, why not just have duets with people? Why not just bring people to the band? Why should it just be us four?
Right.
You know, why not have different people contribute?
And I
to
like
different
that too.
tunes? And nowadays it's kind of
everybody in rap does it now.
everybody
It's
in
like
rap does
Will.i.am
it. At that
on
time
your
they didn't
record.
used to do that. So
No.
I was kind of doing it in the dark. But I realize now they realize there's a lot of. I mean, for them, it's probably commercial possibility for that.
Yeah.
But at that time, people weren't doing that. And I said, man, it's nice to just have friends and just people who got skill. I got a cello player and I heard him play once. I said, man, that cello is magical, man. So he came, he played cello on one cut. And
Brian Nelson, you had him.
And
that sounds great. I mean, that sax is great.
Oh man,
After that happened, did you guys
burning,
consider adding additional pieces to the band, or
considered it? Yeah, but it was never realistic. And
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you the truth. That was one of the reasons that finally, in the end, I put out a solo record because I always thought, man, when I hear the ideal setup for what I hear as music in my head, it would have 2 guitars, it would have a full-time percussionist,
Right.
it'd be a keyboard player, and there'd be a little bit of brass, and there'd be some backup vocals.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, I could never put a band like that together because it just wasn't realistic at that time. So I said, why don't I put out a record one day where just in the studio we bring in the people that can make them sounds, you know?
Gotcha.
Unfortunately, it was. I keep falling back on the same excuse, man. But I was young, man,
Sure.
and it didn't come out with the weight and the gravitas and the focus that I would have liked to have. But the idea was that same kind of thing, is to expand on what punk funk music can.
And you sort of did it.
Sort of did it.
We can't all be Tom Jones and have $1 million budget.
Tom Jones did a nice job with "I Who Have Nothing," though. I wish I could have did that.
That's a good song.
Oh man, he did a great job.
I don't think anybody's going to screw that one up.